Hey y'all, my name is Cassie. I am the creator of Pieces of Scrap, and in today's video we're going to be doing another free amigurumi review video from patterns I found on Instagram. If you guys are not following me on Instagram, make sure you head over there, because if you are, you can suggest patterns to me to review for these videos, for future videos, directly to my Instagram. You can either comment on the patterns that you see and tag me in the comments and let me know that you want me to try that one, or you can DM the patterns to me directly and I will save them for the list of follower suggestions for future videos. Anyway, before we get started, I always like to go over the criteria that I use to rate patterns. So the first one is, would I use the pattern again? I like to find patterns that are market prep friendly, and that usually entails quick patterns that are easy to read and easy to make over and over again. So that means like not a lot of stumbling and not a lot of hiccups, not a lot of sewing. Those are my kind of patterns. Number two is, can I understand the pattern easily? Typically what I'm looking for in free patterns is patterns that don't use a lot of really complicated stitches, and if they do, they should provide detailed instructions on how to make those stitches. So what I mean by that is that if there is a stitch in your pattern that requires a little bit more research, like a loop stitch or something of that sort, I would recommend that you include a description in your pattern on how to make that stitch step by step. That way, if a beginner crocheter comes across your pattern, they don't have to leave your pattern and come back later or try to watch a YouTube video to try to figure out how to make the stitch that you want them to make in order to make your pattern. And number three is pretty straightforward. Do I like the final product? So the first pattern that I reviewed for this video is a follower suggestion. This is a Hermit crab pattern suggested by Beck Made Studio. And the pattern is by Old Soul Factory Crochet. It's a cute low sew pattern. You make this little hermit crab in two pieces. You make the legs and head first, and it's all one piece, and then you make the shell separately, and then you sew the shell into the back loops that you leave open on the body. And if you know me, you know what I'm gonna say about those back loops being open and it still being a sewing pattern. This shell could easily be worked backwards. So right now, to make this shell, you work from the top down. It could easily be worked backwards into these back loop stitches instead of being made separately and sewed on later. And that way it would save you lots of time, and it would also make it a no-sew pattern, and therefore a lot more people would probably try to make the pattern. Typically a lot of patterns that have no sew in the title do a lot better than patterns that don't. The body itself, I got stuck on round 3, specifically because when you get to the last stitch, you still have to fit 2 bobbles into the same stitch and then another single crochet. And it was really hard to fit all 3 of those stitches into that last stitch of the row. And then the other thing about the head is that placing your safety eyes, it doesn't really tell you where in the bobble you're supposed to place them. It just tells you to place them in the bobble. So as you can see, mine are kind of not very well placed. And I could have done with some assistance on where exactly to place them. It is also kind of on me, that because I could have, you know, tried to place them a little bit better before placing the backs on the eyes, but really I think leaving it up to the pattern maker instead of the pattern designer to place your eyes and know exactly where to place them, it kind of leaves, you know, the end product of like people posting pictures of your pattern and tagging you in it. It makes it look it makes the pattern look worse, and I think you're better off just telling people where in your stitches, or give like a photo or something like that about where exactly you placed your eyes. That being said, I still think it's a really cute pattern. It turned out a lot smaller than I thought it would. It's really cute and like handheld little hermit crab guy. And I would definitely recommend the pattern designer to try to work this backward and put out a new version of the pattern that is no sew and kind of works on some of the things that I suggested. I think the pattern would be really popular if some of those elements were worked into the pattern to make an edit of the pattern. Therefore, I would give this pattern 3 stars out of 5. Next pattern that I reviewed is another follower suggestion, and it is Poki the Mini Puffer by Angelfish Creations Co. And this was suggested by Britt the artist. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to finish this pattern. I tried 2 separate times and I could not get it to work. The biggest thing that I got stuck on was I wasn't sure where to place my stitches around the picot stitches. There was just no notes about how to work around them, if you're supposed to work directly into them or if you're supposed to ignore the picot stitches or what you're supposed to do. And I got stuck on row 3 so many times. I reworked the row several times before starting over on my first attempt, and then I worked it several times on this attempt as well and still couldn't get past it and still couldn't get it to work. The reason that this one is bigger is because even though I couldn't get row 3 to work the first time, I still tried to get through the next couple of rows, but I just opted for starting over after I realized how flat this pattern was becoming, and it's not supposed to be flat. It's supposed to be a little puffer fish. It's supposed to be round according to the photos. But by the time I was realizing that it was just staying flat, it was the rows that weren't having any increases in them, so I knew something was wrong. So that is why I started over on the second time. But the reason I had to give up on it kind of was because row 3, there's not enough stitches in the round for that round to work. The previous round has 16 stitches in it, and round 3 calls for 4 increases, but 16 plus 4 does not equal 24, it equals 20. So there's that discrepancy. The pattern says there's 24 stitches. There's not actually 24 stitches with the 4 increases. And then on top of that, you can't really find where you're supposed to place those stitches because of the picot stitches. And I think that is mostly where I keep stumbling on the pattern, where I couldn't finish it. So overall, I couldn't finish the pattern, and I don't feel like it's fair to give a rating on a pattern that I couldn't work all the way through. Just because I couldn't finish it. I'm sure that the pattern, there's something wrong in the instructions, because the increases, when you add them to the number of stitches that the previous round calls for, it doesn't make sense where that number is coming from, because like I pointed out, 16 plus 4 does not equal 24, it equals 20. So I kind of gave up after trying to make it work several times, so I'm not gonna rate this pattern to be fair. It could just be that I just don't understand how to work around picot stitches. The next pattern that I tested is the Chubby Axolotl by A Wicked Stitch of the West, and I absolutely loved this pattern. The only issues that I had were when crocheting the fins on the head and the tail. I kind of stumbled over it a little bit because trying to find the row number is a little bit difficult for me, but also it tells you to repeat in the next 2 stitches down, but that could be misunderstood as skipping a stitch and then working into the following stitch. Upon realizing after that instruction, it says that you should have 3 fins total on each piece, I realized what that meant, and I ended up having to rework that. The tail is really interesting. I think it was kind of funny that in the pattern itself, there's these little doodles of axolotls, and their fin goes all the way around their tail, but these fins that the pattern calls for, you only crochet on either side of the tail instead of just working in a round around the tail. I think that would have been kind of cool and would have eliminated a little bit of the time of having to fasten off and then reattach on the other side to make the same fin. Even with that said, I think it's an adorable pattern and I absolutely love it. I actually made it in 3 different colors. So I've got the pink one, the blue one, and then I made an orange one as well. And I think these will be a really, really good seller. Lots of kiddos really like them some axolotls, so I'm sure this will be a very popular pattern at my booth. So I would rate this pattern 4.5 stars out of 5. The next pattern that I reviewed for this video is Dots the Ladybug by Erin's Crochet, and this pattern is a little interesting. So first off, it calls for you to use felt pieces for your eyes and the spots. So instead of getting felt, because that's not something I have on hand, I ended up just embroidering these things and then placing safety eyes. And then for the antenna, you're supposed to make them separate from the body and then sew them onto the head. But instead, I just opted for crocheting them directly into the head. So what I did was I chained 3 or 4, and then I half double crocheted into the second chain from the hook, and then I slip stitched the rest of the way down and then slip stitched into the body, and that way you kind of got that rounded antenna end like the pattern calls for. My biggest gripe about this pattern is that there isn't instructions on where to place your safety eyes, and there's also no alternative in the pattern for how to embroider these pieces on instead of getting felt and having to glue them on or sew them on. I feel like most people don't use felt when working with amigurumi, so I think having those options of how to embroider things on and use safety eyes instead of using felt is also something that I highly recommend in a pattern. Offer alternatives to the thing that you prefer so that if the majority of the people use those alternatives, that you have instructions on how to do that. So therefore, I would give this pattern 3.5 stars out of 5. The next pattern that I tested is this Kirby Pattern by Amigurumi, and it is kind of similar to hers in a way, but the biggest thing that throws you off when you see the picture and you see mine is the eyes. She has like oval safety eyes instead of circles. I don't have any of those. I've been meaning to get some of those, especially the ones with like little twinkles in the eyes. I think those would be so cute to have, but I don't have them unfortunately, so you gotta settle for the round, kind of goofy looking Kirby eyes. This is a no-sew pattern. The arms and the feet are both bobbles, and you work the pattern from the top of the head to the bottom of the body. So I think this pattern is kind of lacking some kind of basic things that most patterns have. So for example, it doesn't tell you how many stitches are in a row at the end of each row number. So once I got to row 9, the stitches got off, and I didn't know how many stitches were supposed to be in the row, but I did have 2 leftover unworked stitches. So I ended up just adding a decrease into those 2 stitches. So I had 14 stitches at the end of that row. The last row of this pattern calls for 4 decreases, and then you fasten off and sew the hole closed. So I would have thought that because of that, there should have been 8 stitches in row 9, but even with the 2 stitches that I had unworked, that doesn't really make sense. Without those 2 stitches at the end of the row left unworked, if we were to just follow her instructions and count up her stitches, you would have had 13 stitches, and then adding those extra 2 unworked stitches that aren't called for in the pattern, you have 15 stitches. So I don't know how it got off so badly that she thought that there should have been 4 decreases in row 10, or maybe you're missing a row in the instructions or something. But I just ended up kind of improvising the end here, and I was able to finish the pattern, unlike the pufferfish pattern. So instead of working 4 decreases in row 10, like I was saying, I worked 7 decreases, and then I fastened off and sewed the hole closed. So it didn't really cause any issues. I feel like it's still the right shape and size, and it still looks like Kirby. So with those workarounds, you can make the pattern work. But if you weren't aware of how the pattern was wrong and you're like a rudimentary beginner crocheter, you probably wouldn't be able to figure out how to make the pattern work after you've made it like 75% of the way through the pattern. So that being said, even though the pattern I was able to finish, and I do think the final product is cute, I do have to rate the pattern 2 stars out of 5, just because of the fact that there is such a huge discrepancy in the stitches at the end of the 2 last rounds, and I don't even know how we got there. I don't know how we messed up to that point, but it wasn't something on my end, it was definitely something the pattern messed up. So that is why I'm rating it 2 stars out of 5. Alright, so finally we're on to the last pattern of this review video, and it is the Marshmellow Kitty by Crochet by Sandra. This pattern took me 25 minutes to make, so it's really quick. It has 2 separate versions. It's the same exact pattern. You don't have to do anything special to make these different. It just changes the placement of where you embroider your face details and place your safety eyes. So we've got the laying down version A kitty, where you embroider and place your safety eyes onto the beginning rounds of your kitty. And then for this one, you place your embroidery and safety eyes around rows 7 through 8. The thing that I did differently from the instructions in this pattern mainly has to do with the tail. The pattern calls for you to chain to make the tail, single crochet back down the chain, and then sew it on later. So I just opted to, as you can all guess, crochet that directly into the body. That way I wouldn't have to sew anything extra on here. The ears are really simple, so I'm fine with sewing them on. It's just a chain of 3, and then you single crochet into the first stitch of that chain, and there it makes little triangles, and then you just have to sew them onto the head. And that is just so quick and easy that I was just like, I'm fine with just sewing those on separately instead of crocheting them into the head. So very cute pattern. I'm really happy with how it turned out. This pattern's really quick and easy, and I made it in 4 color variations. So I made 2 of the standing guys, and I made 2 of the laying down guys. So I think they're really cute, and I think they'll be really popular at my markets as well. So I'm really excited to share these with you guys and tell you guys about this pattern. It's a really good pattern. I would rate it 4 stars out of 5. Anyway guys, I wanted to also let you know that my baby root veggies pattern is out now. So if you're interested in trying this for yourself, it's for free on my Instagram, but you can also purchase it off of my Etsy if you want to support me, or if you prefer a PDF pattern instead. So make sure you go check that out if you haven't already. And anyway guys, I really hope you liked this video. I really hoped you enjoyed it. I'm glad that I came out with 2 separate patterns that I really like a lot and will be using a lot for market prep. And I hope you find a pattern in this video as well that you want to try out for yourself. Anyway, make sure you comment down below what your favorite pattern from this video was, and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. And with that, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!